Met a man who died 7 years ago. I went back home for a friend's wedding. It was the September of 2015. I live on the other side of the country. I'm friends with the bride, and I've never met the groom. I don't smoke, except sometimes when I'm drinking, and weddings are made for drinking. So I'm coming in from having a smoke. The wedding reception is on the second floor, and there is a staircase leading up to the second floor. A guy comes up to me before I ascend the stairs. He asks me what wedding I'm at, and I tell him. He hands me an envelope and asks me if I can give it to them. It simply says, "One Love" on the front. I say yes, and carry on up the stairs. I go to take a leak, and the bride's father is in the washroom. I hand him the envelope, and proceed on with the night. Fast forward to March of 2016. I'm on my way to go skiing. Where I go skiing, there is no cell reception because it is in a mountain pass, so I always check my cell phone before I enter the pass to see if I have any messages. I check my phone, and I have a message from the bride of the wedding. "Do you remember what the guy looked like who gave you that envelope?" "I don't know a guy. Why do you ask?" "We think it might have been the groom's best friend who died in a car accident." It turns out the envelope contained only money. The phrase "one love" was something the deceased's best friend would often say. It was something he was known for. There's a memorial Facebook page dedicated to the dead friend, so I log into Facebook and check it out. The pictures of him before he died look like the guy I spoke to. He died in 2008. My whole family shares this experience with me about a haunted game. Okay, well, I don't think the game was haunted, but we received a message through the game. This was September 17th, 1992 or 1993. I was about 8 years old. It was my little brother's birthday, and my family and I just got back from the park. My mom, my big brother, big sister, and little brother. On the way back home, I thought it would be a fun idea to make a birthday card for my brother using a game on the Super Nintendo called Mario Paint. For those of you who are not familiar with the game, it was an art studio game that came with a mouse and mousepad. There is a coloring book mode in the game with 4 different pages, one being a birthday cake. Anyways, so we all get home, and I run to turn the system on, and the game starts up like normal, where it says the title and you have to click Mario to start the game. The screen fades to black, and instead of cutting to the guys doing sit-ups, there's text on the screen that says, "Please wait." I would also like to mention that this game was on a cartridge, not a disc, which means it doesn't load. We were all sitting around waiting for a few minutes, frozen by curiosity. We all knew this wasn't normal. After what felt like forever, the screen changes straight to the coloring book page of a birthday cake already decorated and specifically read, "Happy birthday, Will. Love your aunt, Reen." My aunt died in a car crash only a month before. This was the first person in our life to die. We all sat there in awe. I freaked out and turned off the system myself. I don't remember what we did right after that or talking about after. Throughout my life, I would often ask my older siblings if they were just messing with me, but they swore up and down that they didn't. My brother used to make stop-motion cartoons with a game and a VHS, so I thought he was just playing a prank on me, although I knew I turned the game system on and off myself. Recently, my father was found dead, and I have been severely depressed over losing him and losing my younger brother a few years ago. My older brother reached out and asked if I wanted to go with him on a day trip for work so we could talk. I told him how I've lost faith in religion but still search for something past life. He told me he has had a few paranormal experiences throughout life and knows there's something past death. He tells me all his stories and included the Mario Paint story. It was exactly how I remember it, not a slight difference. This got me curious, and that same week, got my mom and sister's version, which also had no changes. They didn't remember as much as my brother and I, but they didn't add any information or change a single detail. My sister even remembered the cake was chocolate with yellow stars on it, which I knew, but don't think I ever shared. I just think it's crazy that after over 20 years, 4 people are able to tell the same story with no changes, and never really talking about it. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to post. I'm curious if anyone else has had an experience with a video game or even the same game. I've heard urban legends, but nothing seems legit to me. Thanks for reading, and sorry for all the typos. My personal experience of Insidious. This actually happened 3 years ago, but I only had the guts to tell the whole story just now. It was last September 11th, 2013, and I was about to fall asleep. I remember checking the time on my phone and it was indicated 11 p.m. Then after a while, I was positive that I fell asleep. For some reason, I suddenly woke up. I faced the window to my right, upon sensing a cold breeze enter the room. I was really weirded out because I know that it was just a dream, and yet everything felt so real. I soon felt a presence at the foot of my bed, and there she was. The lady was in a plain white long-sleeved gown. Her hair was parted in the middle. It was black and very long, but what creeped me out the most was that her face was horribly burnt. What was left of her eyelids were merely mutilated muscle and flesh freshly bleeding. She was staring at me, slowly approaching. Of course, that was my cue to get up and leave. But no matter how hard I tried to will myself to wake up, nothing happens. I tried to sit up, but every time I attempted to do so, there's a seemingly invisible cord that keeps on recoiling, making me bounce back into bed. Less than a minute later, the lady was now on top of me, wrestling with me as I held my arms up in an attempt to break her off. I kept on shouting my cousin's name, but to no avail. And when I felt exhausted from trying, I suddenly woke up to a cold sweat. What was weird was that when I checked my phone, it said 11:15 p.m., which was peculiar since I was positive that it was 11 when I slept. Since then, she has been following me like mad, both in reality and in my dreams. It even came to a point where my religion was questioned, since I had another dream of her again smiling creepily. This happened in 2014. She had another me beside her, who had this sinister smile that I was sure as hell I myself would not be able to pull off. I was aware yet again that it was another dream, and attempted with all my might to wake up. But she was creeping closer, the other me, following close by. I stumbled upon this altar with different relics, and tried to search for this one rosary I could not find. As I was chanting and willing myself to wake up while calling Jesus' name, I finally woke. She followed me for 2 years, even appearing in my cousin's dream, telling her that she wants me. I tried to consult with a priest, but never pushed through with our sessions. One fateful day in March 2015, she finally left. A demon in my home. I lived in Albany, Wyoming, which is next to the capital of the state. If you've never been to Wyoming, then it's basically like any other generic rocky state, known for its many lakes and things like that. We tend to get a lot of tourists that come down to spend their holidays inward, since living here is so expensive. I'm in the United States Air Force, and being stationed at Warren Air Force Base as a vehicle operator, the job practically paid for itself. In days' time, I decided I wanted to try living off base after cross-training and figured I should try renting a house the closest to my base. I was still really young, only just turned 22, when I discovered a simple one-bedroom home in a rural town of Albany. I was ecstatic. Being from Oklahoma and growing up in a rural district myself, I was a big fan of it. This town, however, was really small. You could walk a couple blocks and you'd be at the end of the town in a matter of minutes. So I would actually jog around the town every time in the morning when I first moved. It was 2014, and I had just moved off base and into the house after getting clearance and getting a rather well deal on the home, which was only $250 a month. With all the money I had, I decided to put a down payment on a new vehicle, and thought to hell with it to get my own internet service provider and a gaming computer, since I just love to game out and unwind from it. Plus, the internet service in Wyoming is pretty bad, and getting your own provider is a must. It was a simple September, and the first 2 weeks were real great. I was getting all sorts of sleep in my own home, having friends over for Friday night football, and occasionally going out to parties to try a luck at meeting women, since I was single at the time. It was the beginning of October when it happened, the early night after getting off work. All I wanted to do was just go to sleep, so I lazily brushed my teeth, and within a few minutes, I was already in bed. I laid for a solid 3 minutes at least before dozing off. During that time, I had probably the worst dream I would ever experience in my lifetime. Remember only vivid parts about it. It was something hovering over my bed, and something giving the most disgusted look. I couldn't tell what it was. I can't even give it a sketch. All I could say was that it was horrifying through those few minutes, since all it did was just hover over me and gave out a very faint whisper, which I don't know what it was saying. I woke up in a very heated sweat and was extremely exhausted from that point. I looked around the room and it was pitch black. Figuring it as a nightmare, I checked the clock to see it read 0350 hours, so it was real early in the time. I figured I might as well get up and take a walk around town, since I wasn't working today, so I couldn't fall back asleep. I got up and put my clothes on, and with it being chilly outside, I took the time to go walking around the town. Now, I'm a paranoid guy. I always have been, so of course, I carried my handgun when I went out. I went for my walk, and after a few hours of clearing my head, I felt fine, and started making my trail back, with it being sunrise soon. When I got back to my house, I found the front door wide open. I will admit, when I know that I locked my door when I left and came back to find it open, I was shit scared. I felt my heart drop to my stomach, and I know I was pale. I checked the side of the house to see if any of the black gates were disturbed, but to no avail, and I returned my attention back forward to my home, where I then unholstered my handgun and began a forward advance step a buddy of mine in OSI taught me. I entered my home with my gun at the ready, keeping it trained all around, but not shutting the door behind me, fearing that the intruder may hear me before I find him. As careful as I can, and as slow as I went, I searched each and every room from top to bottom to find my whole house empty and everything undisturbed. I kept repeating the chain of events when I left the house, trying to find some excuse or a way to think that I may have left my door unlocked or left it open, but I specifically remember putting my key in a bolt lock and twisting it. I knew this because I even kept the key on my person, knowing that I would use it to unlock the door. I didn't know what to make of it. I decided that I would change my locks out the front door by the end of the week. A couple days later, it was around late as always, but since I didn't have to show up at my early hours and got much sleep before arriving, I felt real well and thought about playing some video games like the nerd I was. When I got home, the one thing that stood out immediately as I walked back inside was how hot it was. It was a chilly 38 degrees outside, and my entire house felt like it was around in the 80s. I couldn't believe how hot it was, and I thought I may have left the heater on. I went to check on it and found that it was reading 83 Fahrenheit. I figured I would leave my home tolerable with it being cold, but the heater wasn't the best, and it would only heat up to 75 on a really good day. A fireplace inside was what I used to warm up my home. I couldn't believe it still, which was almost like a shock factor, so I figured that maybe the heater had a good boost, and finally started kicking it to gear, and in time, since a snowstorm was preparing to hit eventually. I turned the temperature down and made my way into my bedroom, settling down, and basically starting my night of unwinding. All was well in those couple hours, only when the sudden loud bang of something hitting against my wall on the other side of the room caused me to jump and focus all of my attention. I hesitated and just sat there for around 2 minutes, my breath becoming very heavy as I started to feel myself grow pale once again. I didn't know how to react, and once again I thought intruder. I reached for my pistol, which I always keep at close proximity, and slowly angled it around my room. At that moment, I wished real hard that it was an intruder, cause instead it was nothing. But what I found was a large hole against my wall, and my snow globe onto the floor cracked, and the bottom platform of it dented. I quickly searched the rest of my home to find it empty as always, and I started contemplating on what it could have been. Looking around and continuing to think, I then started to get really nervous when I thought of my dream from before. I walked back into my room to find my computer monitor turned off. I thought at first it was possibly the computer going back to sleep mode, but that faded when I found the back VGA cord unplugged and laying on the floor. I plugged it back inside and settled onto my computer chair, gun at the ready on my desk, while I started to look off ahead outside my doorway and into the living room. I got the feeling of someone looking back at me, and it was definitely not a good feeling at all. I had the feeling of someone looking at me with very malicious intent and extreme notion on harm. But I didn't know what. I had no idea what occurred to me at that time, but for some reason I told myself to lift up my phone and to take a picture outside of my bedroom door. I then turned my computer monitor back on and just tuned myself out of whatever was happening. An hour later, with the real deep feeling no longer there, I pulled my phone out and started checking on what was on the photo that I may have took. And every time I look at that photo, it freaks me out to this day. I still can't look at it often, thinking of how bad whatever that is looks like. I don't know how this photo did not get lost over the years, but what it is none other than a pair of glowing red eyes staring straight back at me from the outside. I didn't believe it at first, and I actually began to hyperventilate. I was so scared of what it actually was. When I saw this photo, I thought I was going to just run out of the door right there. This was the most bizarre thing I'd ever seen, and I kept looking at it to see if it was real. And after a few minutes of finally deciding okay, I just went ahead and shut my door, locked it from my side, and slept with my television and light on. The next day, I got up and went to work as normal. Nothing happened in the weeks to follow until December 4th. During that time, I was already actually planning on moving back on base after a few more incidences occurred, mainly seeing things out of the corner of my eye, hearing knocking, sounds of footsteps, and all sorts of other things. I asked the property manager if he knew anything about this, and he went on about saying he had no idea. That night, though, on December, would be my last night staying in that home. I went on normal as it is, settling back on my computer and preparing to play my game. Whenever I heard a noise, I just shrugged it off, simply being used to it by this point. At first, a few light taps were occurring, and it didn't bother me, only when the light taps turned into a loud slam, when it finally caused me to jump and just stare outside my door. I was hesitant to get up, listening to the silence, when I finally started to slowly stand to my feet and grab my handgun as always. I walked around the room, looking off to find my kitchen empty and nothing around, but the light to my bathroom that I always leave on was off. I figured the bulb may have burned out, so I started approaching towards it before what I felt like an extreme burning sensation started appearing on the top of my right hand when I had my gun held. I stopped and looked over, and there, I saw what still gives me goosebumps. It was a scratch mark, 3 claw marks on the top of my hand. I started to slowly step back, and from there, I turned around and made my way around the small bar table I had on the front of the kitchen, taking another glance up back to the bathroom door, when I saw what looked like something so tall. Its head touched the ceiling. It was all black, but with distinct features of a huge figure, and what looked like also horns on the top of its head. I don't want to exaggerate too much if they were horns, but what made my heart drop was when it had the very same red eyes in the photo staring back at me. I actually rushed back into my bedroom and started breathing deeply, completely afraid of whatever it was. It's an extremely scary feeling when it's something you cannot fight, something that's completely invulnerable to you, and realizing that I was at the mercy of whatever it was. I made like a pussy, and damn straight I ran back. I had enough by this point. I was done. I grabbed my phone, wallet, whatever I would need for work tomorrow, and I was out the door, in my car and on the road in 5 minutes. I drove all the way to Cheyenne and got a hotel room, spending the night and going to work the next day. By this point, I was fully done with that house, and I outright refused to even set foot back inside. I stayed with a friend until my contract cleared, and my service got me back in the barracks. I didn't go back to that house for another couple of days after that, finally getting the confidence when a friend said he would come along with me to get my things. I told him I was moving since the house was breaking down, so I wouldn't scare him while I collected my things. I did it in the daytime though, and was all wrapped up and finished in an hour and a half with no experiences. Only after we were on the road and heading back to base, when I told him everything, and I felt bad for making him go inside, since he started freaking out with him being scared of ghosts more than I. Today, I'm stationed in Germany, and about to go under School for Tactical Air Control Party while serving as a telecommunication operator. Successfully cross-training. I have a girlfriend and living in a decent-sized flat that thankfully is not haunted. I'm doing really well for myself now at the age of 24, preparing to re-enlist soon. I wanted to document this with it still being fresh in my mind, and I still talk about it from time to time. Though after all of what's happened, I sure can safely say that the house in Albin was one of the most scariest incidents that's happened to me. My friend told me the owner of the house recently passed, and the house caught on fire and burned to the ground, so it's no longer there. I don't know how or why. I'm just glad that I don't ever have to live with it still up, and think of the fact that anyone has to go through what I did. Just want to focus on my own thing right now, and let it drift away in my past. Organic Blue Sphere Alien Visitation. It was this past September the 26th, when around 8 p.m., I was hit with fatigue and went to bed abnormally early. The next thing I remember is being woken up by the brightest thing I've ever seen. It was almost like liquid metal, a pulsating ball of plasma right by my head, radiating this crazy silver blue light that actually hurt to look at. It was to my left, where there are no windows or doors. My room also faces a very narrow alley, so it couldn't have been headlights. I instantly got a headache and tried to get up from bed. I could move my legs and arms, but I couldn't pull my chest off of the bed. It was as if something was pinning me down. I tried screaming, but nothing came out. The blue light grew brighter, and I suddenly felt a deep, intense pain on the top part of my gum line. It felt like an incision, and I started tearing up. I began to hyperventilate with each failed attempt to move. The orb almost had a face, but I couldn't look at it for long. And then at last, the light left and it freed me from its hold. I could move. I instantly reached for my phone to call my sister, who lived a few blocks away. But as I searched for her contacts in my phone, I had the feeling of being sedated as I fought to stay awake. I fell back to sleep against my will. The next morning, I woke up thinking the whole experience was just some wild dream or sleep paralysis thing. But I am a dreamer. I dream nearly every night, and I know what a night terror is as well. This was nothing I've ever experienced. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror, and there was the proof. I hadn't made it all up. I had a trail of dried blood on the right side of my mouth and face, where the pain in my gum was. There was what looked like a scoop indent in my gum right above my top row of teeth. It wouldn't be possible for me to have been that part of my mouth. Anyways, I was afraid during the experience, but I don't think that it was a sinister entity. Poltergeist in my bathroom. Just this morning, September 29th, I had a very strange experience that I've never had before, though I have had some weird experiences with ghosts in the past. This one was unique and frightening. I took a shower like I do usually every morning. Some days there is no time. And after washing my hair, I heard a very loud pop. I looked up from behind the shower curtain and noticed the mirror was a quarter way open, say 5 inches or a little less. The loud pop noise I heard sounds exactly like the bathroom mirror opened up, smacked the mirror beside it, and it bounced back. After recently checking, I noticed the mirror could not have opened by a draft. It needs extra force to hit the other mirror. I went back to showering, and all of a sudden, there were 3 loud knocks behind my head. Nobody could have made the knocks because if they did, they would have to be standing inside a thick brick wall. I also know that 3 knocks is supposed to mean a demonic presence. Finally, just before I was done showering, there was another pop. This was a shampoo bottle with a cap which had popped. I think this is pretty creepy, and I'm planning to do an investigation there in the bathroom. I'll see how everything will turn out. More of my mother's paranormal experiences featuring my brother. My mom's a special lady. She seems to feel things and know things that others don't. It seems to me that her gift is that's what you want to call it, was passed on to my brother, who also has some wicked experiences. So, for background information, my family and I have lived in Montreal our whole life. My brother was in college at the time, Dawson College if you really want to know. This will be important. I was in the 6th or 7th grade when this all happened. My brother woke up one morning really not wanting to go to school. This isn't like him at all. He's a straight A student, but that morning he just sat down in the dumps for I don't know what reason. My mom encouraged him to go, so she dropped him off at the bus stop and me at school. Then we all went our separate ways. My mom was late for work that day, not because of dropping me and my brother off, but because she all of a sudden decided to buy my brother and herself cell phones. She never had thought about cell phones before, but she just decided out of the blue to go get some. I'm gonna go ahead and assume she didn't make that decision herself, and something compelled her to do it. She admits that she went a different way after dropping us off. This is very unlike her. Anyways, she gets to work with the cell phones in her hand, telling her coworkers how her son is gonna be so happy. She then proceeded to throw up out of nowhere, with absolutely no warning or previous nauseous feelings. She was lightheaded and felt terrible, but she said she could handle it and she just needs to sit for a bit. Half an hour later, her best friend, who is pretty obese, runs through the door and yells, Judy, are you alright? My mom answers that she'll be fine, and asked how she knew she was feeling sick. Oh honey, you haven't heard? And proceeds to change the radio station. The broadcaster is reporting that all cell phone lines are down around downtown Montreal. Why? There was a shooting at Dawson College. All cell phone lines were being overused. And that moment, the cell phones that were still in their boxes on the counter fell to the ground. At around the same time, my school canceled all classes and let us play in the yards instead. I was playing with my friends when I felt sick all of a sudden, like my mom. No warning, just sick and dizzy and feeling terrible. I remember feeling cold too, even though it was at the beginning of September in a hot and humid Montreal day. I went to the office and called my mom from there, and she was panicking on the phone but wouldn't tell me why. I fainted a couple minutes later. My brother wasn't hurt. He got out unscathed, but he saw things that day that changed him. I've got more stories that are much more paranormal than this, but this one hits closest to home for me and I wanted to share it. The Friendly Cable Box Ghost. Short preface. I've always been highly skeptical of the paranormal, although my skepticism has waned a bit as a result of this isolated experience. I still feel that there might be a rational explanation for what happened. That's why I'm posting this, to see if anyone has any viable theories. Also, I'm a first-time Redditor, so I apologize if this post is improperly formatted, in the wrong sub or too long. Anyways, in July of 2011, I signed a 1-year lease for an old 1918 towering row house in Baltimore Fells Point neighborhood with two very good friends. Let's call them Ed and Mitt. Within a few weeks of moving in, we'd set ourselves up with a 47 Vizio HD TV and a Comcast digital cable box, which received approximately 400 channels. Several months into our lease, Ed, Mitt, and I began noticing that our cable signal would occasionally freeze for about 1 second, then switch to a new channel without any one of us touching the remote. We jokingly attributed the phenomenon to a ghost in our cable box. Oddly enough, the channel I'd switch to would often be something that we were at least marginally interested in watching. Example, a good movie on HBO, or a show we never heard of but would wound up liking. This is how I discovered Storage Wars on A&E. Now, this observation might be colored by a selective memory bias, but the following sequence of events definitely is not. One Thursday night in late September, Ed, Mitt, and I would come home from the bar at around 11:30 p.m. Ed and Mitt head up to their bedrooms to Skype with their girlfriends. Both were in long-distance relationships, while I plopped down on the couch to watch SportsCenter. When SportsCenter goes to commercial, I reach for the remote to change the channel to Comedy Central, wondering aloud if a new Colbert was on. Before my fingers touch the remote, however, the TV signal freezes for a beat. Before switching to Comedy Central, I thank the ghost for the assist, chalking it up to improbable coincidence. When Colbert goes to commercial several minutes later, I jokingly ask the ghost to check what's on HBO. Once again, the channel switches to HBO before I can touch the remote. Now, a bit intrigued, I decide to press my luck by asking him to switch to the HD HBO channel. As soon as the words leave my mouth, the channel switches to HD HBO. At this point, I'm getting sufficiently creeped out, so I call Mitt down from his bedroom to make sure I'm not going insane. When Mitt arrives, I place the remote in the middle of the room and ask him to say a random channel out loud. He says, "History." Several seconds later, The cable box switches to the History Channel. Now, we never watched the History Channel. Even if we'd wanted to, we'd have no idea which number it was. Miss suggests that Ed might be playing a joke on us by changing the channel from a remote in his room, which I refute by arguing that A, it's totally out of character, and B, he's out of range, and C, he never known which number the History Channel was. Just to make sure, I quietly asked the ghost to switch to PBS. Literally no louder than a whisper. Of course, the channel instantly changes to PBS. Myth is also now sufficiently freaked out. On his advice, we do a quick sweep outside to make sure nobody's peering through our windows and changing the channel, finding nothing suspicious. Next, we call Ed down from his bedroom to do a little experiment. When he arrives, I confiscate everyone's cell phones, thinking one of them might have had an app that stimulates a remote and removes the batteries from the cable box remote, keeping our eyes on the 2 living room windows to make sure nobody is there. We ask Ed to name a random channel. He says ESPN News. Nothing happens for around 30 seconds. Just as Ed is about to return to his Skype session upstairs, the channel changes to ESPN News. We all fall back on the couch dumbstruck. Now, here's where it gets really weird. After successfully engaging the ghost several more times, I try simply thinking of a channel, like Showtime. Lo and behold, after around 20 seconds of concentrating on nothing but Showtime, specifically the red letter logo and the channel number, the channel switches to Showtime. I shit you not. Ed and Mitt don't believe me, so I tell Ed to think of a channel as hard as he can. Around 20 seconds later, the TV switches to MTV2. Ed's jaw drops. He was thinking of MTV. At this point, it's getting pretty late. Ed and Mick call it a night, as they both have jobs that require them to get up early. At this time, I was dumbfounded by how they could simply walk away from what was hands down the strangest thing any of us has ever experienced. Before Mick goes to sleep, I go up to his room and ask him to think of a single topic. Then I head back downstairs to TV. Seconds later, the cable box switches to Top Gear on the History Channel. I head back up to Mitt's room to ask him what he was thinking of. His answer? Fast cars. When I told him the box had switched to Top Gear, he straight up slammed the door in face and noped into bed, hiding under his covers. It suddenly occurred to me that if anyone else is going to believe what we witnessed, I need to record it onto video. I head back downstairs, take out my phone, and prop it on the couch so the camera is capturing both the TV and me. I say B-E-T out loud. 30 seconds pass. I say it again. A minute pass. I try saying other channels: ABC, Home Shopping Network, MSNBC. But the TV remains on the History Channel. Feeling defeated and foolish for not setting up the camera earlier, I head up to bed. And after that night, the ghost in our cable box has more or less disappeared. The channel spontaneously changes maybe 3 or 4 more times over the next few months, but never to what we were saying or thinking. Eventually, it stopped happening altogether. I still regret not setting up a camera to capture what was happening, as to this day it continues to defy all logical explanations we can come up with. So, Reddit, I ask you, what happened that night? Was there a telepathic ghost manipulating my cable feed? I feel absolutely ridiculous typing in that question, and asking out loud to my friends who weren't there just draws concerned looks. But until I figure out what happened, I'll remain open to the possibility that there are paranormal phenomena in this world that cannot be explained by science or logic, even if the phenomena are just benevolent, telepathic, remote-hogging ghosts. I saw my mother's spirit the morning of her funeral service. My mother passed away this September after a long battle with Alzheimer's. My whole family was by her bedside in the days leading up to her passing. I've never been a religious person. I have some spiritual beliefs, not ghosts per se, but maybe a soul. Nothing dogmatically religious, despite me minoring in religious studies in college. I wrestle with my beliefs as I believe in science and the burden of proof, but this struck me literally too close to home. So here's what happened. My mother passed on September 1st, and we had a service for her on the next Sunday. My wife and I were staying at a hotel near my dad's apartment, and I've been for 2 weeks. On Sunday morning, 3:30 a.m., I woke in the hotel room, glanced at the alarm clock, and then rolled over and saw someone in the room near the door. I recoiled at first, out of fear, figuring it was an intruder. But it was my mom. She was slightly transparent. The room was dark and she looked healthy and younger than the last few years. I said hello and she told me to go back to sleep. And that she loved me, and I did. Even as I write this now, when I've told this story to my sisters, I start tearing up and crying. The next morning I felt not happy, but okay. I haven't had any experiences since, and I don't have any rational explanation, nor do really know what to do with this. My mom was spiritual and mildly religious. I knew that I was her only kid that was sort of spiritual as well. I don't know. I'm rambling at this point, and I just wanted to share.